Well, 20 years of experience. Wow, that's amazing. So, yeah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's great. You are someone that we really need to talk to clearly because AI SEO, AI search, AI discovery, algorithmic discovery, all these things, how people stumble across us and how we increase our surface area for that. I think is crucial to any business today, right? So let's just start by explaining what those things that I've just rattled off are and what you're working on there at Wix around those things.
Yeah, so I'm the head of AI search and SEO communications. And so my role is essentially I communicate the value of AI search and SEO to Wix users, and we've got over 300 million users worldwide. And I communicate the value of Wix to folks who are working in the AI search and SEO space. And with regards to what SEO and AI search are, essentially it's about building your visibility, building your footprint online, and making sure
Mm.
that people can find you when they need you. So SEO stands for search engine optimization, and that is where you're sort of optimizing your website so that robots, like Googlebot, for instance, can crawl your website and index your website, and so that humans want to go to your website, right? So you're writing content so that humans want to see it, and you're making your technical configuration so that bots can see it. With AI search, what happens is you're essentially adding another layer on top of that, where you're thinking also about how you're visible in things like ChatGPT and Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, DeepSeek, all of these different tools, and how you're essentially adding another relevance layer on top of your SEO layer. So all those tools still use SEO, but then they'll add on another layer on top of that. And you said things that we're looking at. We're also looking at now is the agentic element, which is another layer further still on top of that, because digital marketers don't have to wear enough hats. And essentially, it's where you're sort of looking at making your website more ready for agentic users who essentially use the web in a slightly different way from humans, but potentially are making decisions on behalf of humans.
Interesting. And I mean, obviously you've been in the game a long time, over 20 years, and you've seen a lot of change. Just about this current hype about AI search, is that a bit overplayed? I mean, largely, is Google still by far the biggest player?
So we have an article on the AI Search Lab, which is an AI search communications hub that I envisaged and launched in 2025 with my team. And essentially, we have a thing on there called AI search versus Google, and we've been tracking this. Okay, so Google gets around 82, 83 billion visits every month. And that's
Wow.
been the case for a while. But what we tend to see is that if you look at it over a 12-month average, the growth to Google doesn't seem to be that much different, right? It's pretty even. And actually, if you pull it back over the last 12 months from Q1, so Q1 2025 back to Q1 2024, and then the 12 months before, there was actually a ever so slightly, according to our data anyway, an ever so slight decrease in traffic. Could be margin of error, but essentially it's not growing significantly according to the data that we have from SimilarWeb. What we see on the other hand, though, is that if you look at searches that are made on Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT,
Mm.
Grok, Copilot, Perplexity, all of those combined, the amount of growth that they're seeing is immense. So Q1 2026, there were 27 billion visits to AI search. In Q1 2021, there were only 15.6 billion visits to AI search. So that's like a 42% increase, which is, that's significant.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of that behavior is not what you would be doing on Google, right? I mean, if you want to know plumber near me, you put that into Google, I don't think many people are asking that ChatGPT, and isn't most of the time people spend with AI different kind of behavior?
So that's definitely that's a question that I get a lot about this, particularly when I started looking at that research. And what I would say
Mm.
is that arguably the AI searches are worth more, because if
Yeah.
I go to an AI tool and I say, "This is my CV, help me write it,"
Mm.
then that's a search that you wouldn't have made for example of a marketing executive CV, or how to format a CV or like all of the search. So you would traditionally, like, if we spin it back 5 years ago, you would have had to do a bunch of searches to get that content, to get that information.
So it's replacing searches, but not like for like. It's replacing a lot of searching with a different behavior because we've got these new tools.
So there's different tools, and also the other thing is that like it's constantly evolving, and the tracking this data is also really tricky because Google is becoming more and more AI first. So there's AI mode, there's AI overviews, and Google I/O they've launched more AI features coming into search. Additionally, when you go into some of these tools, many of these tools, they have lots of features within them. So, for instance, we have a Wix MCP. And I can use Wix within Claude, within Perplexity, within ChatGPT. Historically speaking, if I wanted to go to my Wix website, I may very well Google, Wix.com to get to it. So that would reduce the number of clicks that we're getting from Google. Additionally, one of the top things that people Google is Google, and so then there's lots of different tools. Like I can't remember how many times I've had to Google, Sheets for Google or Google Docs or that sort of thing. And so those searches are going to go down because people are just able to access them within Claude or within whatever tool that they're using. So it is tricky, but the way I like to think about it is this. I had a look at the transition between different types of music formats. In high school, I had a Discman, and I remember a friend of mine showing me like a first gen MP3 player, and it was just this little box with buttons, and it looked like a circuit board. And he was like, "Oh, you can play like 400 songs," and I was like, "Where are they? Where are the songs? I don't understand." And he was like, "They're all in these files." I'm like, "Where am I going to get all these files, dude? Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And it didn't make any sense to me, right? But then the iPod dropped, and the iPod was like 2 buttons, and they had the whole infrastructure that was ready to go, and everybody was using it, and it was really, really easy. And so essentially, like when we hit that inflection point for AI searches, you're going to have fewer and fewer people like even accessing classic Google. You're going to have fewer and fewer people using that because it's easier to use AI, because you literally just vocalize to your phone or your car or your refrigerator or your watch what you need, and they would just give you the information, and they'll give it to you in a way that you understand. So if it's too complex, you can say, "I don't know what that means, explain it to me," and it will. And so I think that for marketers who are trying to navigate this transition phase, because essentially Google's in beta mode right now. It's like they're testing everything all the time. And
Well, they
so
are.
and if you're trying to navigate that, I think it's worth putting a few plays in terms of the AI search, monitoring it. You can monitor in a couple of different ways. You can either buy one of those tools, or we have a tool built into Wix, for instance, that's the AI visibility overview, but you can also monitor it with a Google Sheet. Like you can do that too. So just keep an eye on which queries are shifting, where the traffic's coming from, and you can also see your traffic in GA4 as well.
And there's actually a free Google Looker Studio dashboard someone created and has gone around. It breaks down your AI traffic taken from your GA4 and just presents it in a nice, neat way. But that's really interesting because, of course, yesterday was Google I/O. They launched this thing called Spark, which is going to roll out soon, which is their version of OpenClaw. These kind of always-on 24/7 agentic AI systems that work away on your goals in a persistent way. And so does that throw up more opportunities for our business and our website to be found, do you think? And if so, how do we adapt to that?
Yeah, so I think that what people need to realize is that we are shifting from websites being a destination to being a resource. Okay, so for an agent, one of the things that people, the people hear the word agentic and the agentic web and AI agents, and it all sounds super futuristic and it sounds super techy and all that sort of stuff. But at the core, the TLDR about agents is that agents do stuff. right? So this thing that you're talking about, Gemini Spark, it's on all the time. It's trying to help you achieve your goals. So let's say one of your goals is to increase your protein and grow more lean muscle mass, as
Yeah.
many people who are my age are pursuing at the moment. Then it will be constantly looking at new information about different things that you can do. So then
Right.
it would say to me, "Hey, Crystal, there's this new thing that you should be doing. You should be doing peptides now, not just
Yeah,
collagen.
it
Now you need."
proactively comes to you and says, "Hey, you didn't ask me to do this, but I found this thing because I know this is one of your goals."
Right.
And it's interesting, isn't it? It's proactive.
Right. So with that, if you are a brand, then there's a couple of things you need to do. One of them is you need to know your customer inside and out, right?
Mm.
Because any of these agents are going to know them. Essentially, like for these agents, like they are working on behalf of the human orchestrator. If I have an agent, it's essentially like my Alfred. Like I'm Batman, it's my Alfred, and they're doing my bidding, right? So if you as a business don't know your customers, don't know who they are, don't know the kinds of ways that they behave, the kinds of, the kinds of things that they do, the kinds of things that they're worried about, then you're not going to be prepared for this moment, right? Because the bespoke is going to be the benchmark, right? People are going to be expect to see, bespoke, custom, really really highly tailored experiences both on websites and and in their interactions with each other. So that's super important. Know your customers, use your customer data. Instead of pulling FAQs from some SEO tool somewhere, pull your FAQs from your actual customers, from
Mm.
your sales calls, from your
Mm.
from your user voice recordings, from the questions that people email you in your CRM. I use the Slack thing. We have a monthly webinar that we host
Mm.
for the Wix SEO on the Wix SEO Hub, and we get questions from there. I use those questions and we write blogs on them. We have a forum,
Yes.
and I
Oh,
know that
definitely.
our forum is full of people going, "What about this? What do we do here? How do we do this?" We answer those questions in our blogs to make sure that people have the answer, so that when they ask me, I can just give them the link and they go, "Oh, great, thank you."
Well, it
And
sounds obvious, but I do the same thing in my content with comments, and
yeah,
looking at comments on my competitors' content as well,
absolutely.
because that preempts. It's not just you're being good and nice and customer centric and all that. Of course, that's lovely, but it's also a very accurate predictor of what people will probably be going searching, right?
Yes.
And in a lot of ways gives a lot more detail and nuance than sort of traditional keyword research. It gives you more specific pain points,
Yes.
and things that just lead you to more detailed, relatable content.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's interesting idea about, I want to just really highlight that thing you said about see your website not as a destination but as a resource,
Yeah.
and I can that's a very good way of seeing it, because none of us do things enough. What I mean by that is I play tennis, right? My
Mm-hmm.
Claude, my ChatGPT knows I play tennis. And I can imagine a world in which that starts to go, hey, you haven't asked me about grip tape for 3 months, and you really should be changing it every 3 months. Fact is, I only change it every 6 months. So you're going to have these proactive AIs saying, hey, you should be reordering that supply of this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to go, well, I can find that for you. And it's going to go to the easiest source. It's going to go to the first website that comes up that's got a good market price on that. And you want that to be your website. But it also might need more information and
Yes.
might go to your content for that. So
Yes.
do you have anything? Do you have any guidance on optimizing for that, or is it the same SEO tactics, essentially, that we've talked about for many years?
Yeah, so this is great. So that's a great example. So this brings me on to the second thing that websites need to do, which is to make your website do thingsy. Agents do stuff. Your website needs to be do thingsy, right? It needs to be a place where people can do something, or a place where agents can do something.
What
So
do you
you
mean by
make
that?
So what I mean by that is that basically, like, let's say your tennis example, you've got a blog that talks about grip tape, okay? But maybe there's no button, there's no form to buy it. There isn't an opportunity to buy the grip tape on the blog. It just talks about grip tape. I've seen this a million times. So make sure it's there. Maybe there isn't a place where a button where they can click and call you. So in agentic stuff, they talk about imperative and declarative. Declarative is where you tell someone about
Yeah.
something. Imperative is where you give them the opportunity to do stuff. There's something called WebMCP, and within WebMCP, you can declare which parts are the parts that the website can do things on. So in the Wix MCP, And in something called NL Web, for instance, you can search on a page that doesn't even have a search bar, for instance. So, for instance, if you have a
Got you.
website that doesn't have a search bar,
Yeah.
you're also less do thingsy. If you don't have, if you just got a brochure site, that's not
Mm.
useful necessarily. And the other thing is that you were talking about, where they can order it, the easiest place to order it, in terms of, again, making it more actionable, making it a
Mm.
more interactive website. If your website is configured for agentic shopping, then they will use you. This is another buzzword, is called interoperability. You'll hear
Yeah.
that a lot, and that just basically means that it works with different systems together. And essentially, if your website is configured for like the UCP, which is the Universal Commerce Protocol, which Google is using, or is configured for the ACP, which is the Agentic Commerce Protocol,
Mhm.
then you're going to be more likely to be able to be used by agents, because agents can use those things. So in the
Got you.
agentic space, you'll hear all this talk about this protocol and that protocol and that protocol. What's happening with those protocols is essentially we're people are rewriting the web for agents, because agents, they want to be able to do stuff, but they can't just go out in the web like just willy-nilly. They can't just
Mm.
go and do whatever.
Mm.
They need guardrails. And that's what these protocols do. So these protocols have handshakes. They have ways to verify, whether an agent is a real agent, or is a good
Yeah.
agent. They have ways where you can protect private information and things like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
So essentially, one thing everybody can do is to add more actionable points on your website, right?
And how do I
If
do that? Is there a one and done plugin for that?
So the forms and stuff like that, anybody can do that. You don't need to
Course.
be a super techie whiz
Yeah.
person to do that. All of these protocols and things, a lot of these are happening at scale. So for instance, like at Wix, we are implementing this for people. So there's something called NL Web, which is a protocol from Microsoft. We've built a one-click implementation for that. You literally click it, and we built it in the back end, and then you're
Nice.
configured for that. We are a CMS that is the first. We're the first CMS that is an official corporate signatory for the ACP. We've configured something that works with Stripe, works with PayPal, for
Mm.
agentic shopping. We're working alongside Google for other protocols as well, and things like that. So have a look at who your tech stack is,
Mm.
and
Mm.
where they're making moves to make you applicable for that. So like if you're using Etsy, for instance,
Mm.
Etsy is set up for a lot of these things. Booking.com is set up for some of these things. eBay is doing a lot for these as well. So have a
I
look at
mean,
your
I remember a
stack.
time when, and it's not that long ago, when people wouldn't buy stuff on their mobile phone, right? They would be maybe on the train looking at products, but they were like, no, I'll have to buy this when I get home, because no idiot buys anything on a mobile website. And I think we're in that stage now. I mean, I don't know. Um, I don't know many people that are letting their agents buy stuff, their AI agents buy stuff on their behalf, with free access to their credit card. But do you think that's coming?
I think, if you think about Amazon, the Amazon one click like purchase, like you like on Amazon, they just have the thing, and people buy stuff with Alexa, and have
Yeah.
subscriptions with Alexa and things, and they just say, Alexa, buy me a new phone charger, and she'll go,
Mm.
okay. And then the phone charger shows up, and people don't even go to a website. They just get the phone charger.
But that's a
So
pretty. I mean, that is quite niche. I would never do that. Again, I don't know anyone that does that. But
but what I think is that I think when it becomes more integrated, and this is the thing that Google is really pushing for.
yeah,
They've talked a lot about artificial general intelligence, which is what I think is their big vision for Gemini, which is a
yeah,
single entity that's looking across all of the different systems. And essentially, with these tools, like Google already has my Google Wallet details. They already know all of this
yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
and they are also configured for Google Home. They are Gemini is the assistant for Google Assistant, for Gemini Home, for
Mm.
Android Auto, now for Siri. So I think that once people get more and more used to it, and because it becomes more and more convenient and more seamless, I think people are going to be more likely to use it.
Yes, I think we are. I think we're getting there. I just think we're in that stage where it's just nowhere near the mainstream. It seems a bit scary and a bit like giving an agent your credit card details. Are you insane? But like we've seen with a lot of the evolution of trust in the digital world, I think we will,
Yeah.
as it proves itself, we'll quite possibly get there.
Yeah.
Right. So practical things for now are, well, how did you put it? So that you can
Do
people can
thingsy. That's
right.
that's my official term.
Yeah. So that every page on your website, people or agents, because remember, it's going to be better for humans anyway. If I can take action on any page on your website as a human,
Yes.
that's a pretty good thing
Yes.
because I'm closer to
Yes.
conversion.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And
So,
you get more data on like what's going on and what's interesting to people and what
mm.
matters to people and all of that sort of stuff. It's a win-win. You can't lose if you do that.
Well, I'm always, I don't know about you, but I always think that anytime people ask me, how do I optimize for the algorithm? How do I hack the TikTok algorithm, the Google algorithm? I just say, look, it's all about humans. If you optimize for humans and humans are seen to engage, dwell, do, etc., then the algorithm will be your best friend. So I'm always a big fan of that, optimize for humans first. But what do you think about that in terms of what we've talked about here?
So I think it's interesting that you talk about TikTok and you talked about, videos and responding to comments on videos is because I think this whole thing is going to become a lot more algorithmic. So
Mm,
essentially like at the moment we have like page 1 of Google, like, oh, are you on ranking on page 1? And it's like and it's become more and more and more, but it's been for a while where it's like which page 1? Right? Which page 1 are you
wow.
talking about? Because my page 1 is going to be very different from yours,
Yeah.
especially going forward. So like when I go onto YouTube, for instance, my algorithm is completely different from my husband's, right? Mine is all like puppies and Beyonce and
Yeah.
like that's what my algorithm is. And my husband's is like news and sports and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And what we're going to see with the Google's rolling out something called personal intelligence that's bringing through like your YouTube data
Mm,
to give you recommendations on things and bringing through like your email and all of that different stuff.
mm,
So when you're talking about like engaging with comments, engaging with people and then driving the algorithm and engaging with humans, essentially like this is where it's headed, where brands on the web are going to need to think more like content creators who have been working with this like very human led, very engagement led
mm,
space in social, right? So people who've been doing like social media management, like they know that like I need to be very strong on my niche. I need
mm,
to be very engaged with my audience. I need to interact with my audience. They need to want to interact with me. I need to have regular touch points and things like that. You can't just publish one thing and like hope for the best. You have to engage and things like that. And so I think that, it is more involved. And I think it is going to change how we interact. But as you said, like it does come back to people and it will come back to those interactions. And if the people are interacting with you and the people are engaging with you,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
the agents will have more confidence that you are the person that they should recommend because based on the previous interactions that they've had
Yeah.
with you, they liked you. So they'll say we'll send you back to Will because Will did that thing, he was great the
Mm,
last time, so you should go back to Will because Will is there and he can help you and that sort of thing. Whereas, if they're
mm.
just having to go out of nowhere, then they, they're going to be less confident, they're less likely to recommend.
It makes me think that you know how there are three pillars of SEO:
Mhm.
technical SEO, or content or on-page SEO, as people call it, and then
Mhm.
off-page or reputational SEO, right?
Mhm.
And it seems to me that we're talking about this, and I'm thinking, well, those things are all important still, right? We have to have a technical SEO. We have to have a website that works, that's crawlable, that's usable by machines and humans. Content SEO. We need to have a website that's got useful, helpful content on, and also really clearly defined services and products. And also reputational SEO. We need to be seen to be an engaging entity on the internet and important because people engage with us and also mention us and link to us and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you're the expert. I mean, you're far more of an SEO expert than me. Would you agree that that's a good definition of SEO, sort
Yeah,
of the last
that's a
25
classic
years?
framework. Yeah.
Right. So in each of those three buckets of work, essentially, they're three work streams, aren't they? Essentially, what do we need to do to set ourselves up for this future? I mean, let's start with technical. What are the extra things over and above the obvious of having a good website that loads quickly and is crawlable, etc.? What are some things there people can do technically?
So For the agentic element, there are lots of very specific things. So again, I mentioned like protocol, making yourself more relevant for protocols. Thinking about structured data, for instance, is really relevant if you have NLWeb enabled, and also we've seen lots of data to suggest that structured data can be really useful for RAG based queries. So RAG being
Yes.
retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially when an LLM will go and do a search, and they will tend to do this for newer information. So if I was to say what happened at Google I/O yesterday, they would
Yeah.
have to carry out a fresh search on that information. Most of the technical things that you do in SEO to be crawlable and indexable are standard, are the same for LLMs. For agents, there are additional things that you can do in terms of making the content really, really easy to digest for agents. So for instance, people are experimenting with Markdown. People are using, JSON, like
Yeah.
well-known .json files to
Yes.
expose like REST APIs and
Yes.
different endpoints for agents. And there's also something called LLMs.txt, which has been very controversial within the SEO space.
Yeah.
However, developers and Google have recently added LLMs.txt verification to their agentic browsing audit within Chrome DevTools. And the reason why is because essentially you can use it as a file to give agents to ground them in information. So
Yes.
this means that it costs less for the agents to do their job. So those are technical things that
So
you
that's
can do.
data a lot of what, just to really bring it down to smart and less technical listeners, those things you've just talked about there are all about structuring data to make it more machine readable. So JSON, for instance, is a way of structuring information in essentially organized chunks so that it's quicker for a machine to go through and find the bit it needs. Or like you say, you talked about LLM.txt, which is essentially just a text file you have in your root folder of your website, which is a quick overview of what a machine would need to know about this website without it having to crawl through the entire website to make its mind up what this site's about. So things like that. Is fair?
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
Right, cool, like it. So then in terms of content SEO, we've always been told, like I say, to have, content that is easy to read, easy to access, and then to continuously update with, like blogs and articles to target largely long tail, more niche specific keywords that we can see respond to what people are searching for. Obviously, it's an oversimplification. There's a lot more to say there.
Yeah, of course.
But what do you think? What else do you think we should be doing in terms of content SEO to make life easy for these agents?
So for agents, in terms of content, I don't think that that's too much of a big deal, other than making sure that like your CTAs are really clear for all of the buttons and actionable elements across your website, and making sure that you've got good logical navigation. Additionally, on the content point, I'm not sure if this counts as content or if it counts as technical, but accessibility. So again, that
Yeah.
Chrome developers audit has, Lighthouse audit for agentic tools also has an accessibility tree in it, because agents use area tags to navigate a website. So in the same, like your H1s, your H2s, your alt text, all of that sort of stuff, your and mouse free screen reader navigation, that's the same thing that agents use to navigate a website, particularly for like agentic browsing and things like that. So making sure you have good accessibility on your website is really important. Making sure that you have clear logical navigation is really important. Thinking about your URLs is actually really important. So LLMs will hallucinate URLs, and if you look at the hallucinated URLs for LLMs, they very often make logical sense, right? So we had one where it was saying like, oh, this is where domains are, and we didn't have one that was domains. We had one that was domain. So we made up a new one that was domains and redirected it to the other one.
It's such a good point, because I see that all the time.
All the time.
Hallucinated, made up URLs that are linked to in LLM content. But you're absolutely right. It's they kind of imagine the most predictable URL, don't they? Like what it would logically probably be in its simplest way. So that's such a good idea, actually, to sort of preempt what they might be.
Yeah.
But I suppose what I was asking was like, should we still be creating article content and going after those long tail keywords?
Yes.
Is that still important?
Yes. Okay. So here's the other thing. Okay. So in terms of the type of content you should make, essentially, if we're thinking about, there's two different types of LLM responses. If you're thinking about responses, there's training data responses and there are RAG responses. A training data response is essentially the LLM coming off the dome. So it's whether using their training data, the information they've been trained on. So in the PT in ChatGPT stands for pre-training, right? So they read all of the internet, and then you ask them a question and they will give you an answer. If I was to ask an LLM, why is Dolly Parton a great musician? They don't need to look anything up, right? Because all of the training data that they have will cover lots of reasons why Dolly Parton's great. If I was to say, how has Dolly Parton influenced Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album? They would have to look that up because that's something that happened fairly recently, right?
Yeah.
So the training data information, that the content you need to make about that is content that reflects who you are to your core. In SEO, we've called this content evergreen content previously. And so it's that kind of content. And in that kind of content, you need to utilize the kinds of phrases. There's something called semantic triples, where you would say like Wix is a website builder. Yeah. Crystal Carter is an SEO expert. Will Francis is a podcaster, that sort of thing. And you need to make them really, really clear. And you need to make sure that they disambiguate you with both the entity and the relation. So for instance, if I was to say, Steve McQueen is a man known for his films, that's a semantic triple, that's cool, but that is two people, right? There's Steve McQueen from the 60s who drove fast cars and all that sort of stuff. Then there's Steve McQueen who's working now. So the way that you disambiguate that is you say Steve McQueen is an Academy Award winning man known for his films, right? Because or Academy Award winning director known for his films. That's only one person. Okay. So you think about this with your brand. I've had people who are saying, oh, not showing in ChatGPT when you ask for like best marketing agency in Paris. And then I look on their website and they say the same thing as every other website. Make sure your website says who you are, why you're important, and that it's super consistent on your website, on your Facebook, on your LinkedIn,
well, we
on
skip
your
it because
Instagram.
it's the basics.
It's basic, but
you
the thing
sort of
is,
think, well, what, I shouldn't have to say. I mean, really, so and so is a shop that sells. You think, does this mean there's more of a role for like an about page now?
Yes, the about page is super important for training data responses. It's really important to have that. So the training data responses, you need to have your brand. You're building up your relationships. You're building your relevance, right, for who you are. So you need to make sure that you are in the right space, and so that for your evergreen content, you're doing that. For the RAG responses, this is where you're more likely to get a click from an LLM. And to do this, we need to be thinking more like reporters. We need to be thinking more like, more like content creators on platforms like TikTok or platforms like Instagram. So on TikTok, if you spend any time on TikTok, if any news breaks, then there's loads of influencers who are immediately on it and who are like, I saw this happened, find out about the information. I've got all the piping hot gossip, all that sort of stuff. Okay. And similarly with websites, where you will get clicks is where you have content that is both fresh and spicy. So fresh information is like Google I/O happened yesterday. Here's my hot take on what's going, or here's all of the information that they covered. People are going to get that, and they're going to come to a website for that because they can't necessarily get that from an LLM. And then the spicy thing is your opinion. Okay, LLMs don't have opinions. Don't have opinions. And if I wanted to hear the hot take on what happened on Google I/O and what it means for all of us, I wouldn't go to an LLM for that. I would go to a human for that, because the human would be able to process it in an interesting way. So when you think about the content for your website, if you're trying to get traffic from LLMs and even traffic from humans, think about stuff that is like new and is pushing it forward and articulates your point of view. Okay. And the other thing that you can do in terms of newness is something that is adding something new and exclusive to the conversation. I've mentioned some of the research that we've done on the AI Search Lab. That was research that we did. Nobody else did that. So if somebody's looking for that information, the LLM will send people to us because we are the source of that information. No matter which business you're in, you will have exclusive information that you can share that they will have to cite you for, because that you're the only person that has that information, and it's interesting information that they would have to refer to you for. So the content does have value, but it serves a different purpose. Gone are the days where you can just write a what is a platypus article, and just expect the traffic to roll in. That traffic, that article's been written 17 million times. Unless you're adding something that's
Hmm.
genuinely new, that's fresh and or spicy, then you're unlikely to get a click from Google or from LLMs.
Well, there's quite a lot in there. That's so interesting to hear your take on it. When people talk about RAG can mean a lot of things, but it's really where the LLM goes and gets information rather than draws on its existing training data, its existing
Yes.
knowledge. And you're right, it's more likely to do that with topical things that it knows are likely to be newer than its knowledge cutoff date, the date after which it doesn't know anything. So that is interesting. And do you know what? I don't know if this is why, but I've seen a data that, and I feel like I see this anecdotally, but it might be confirmation bias, that ChatGPT does seem to really like fresh. It seems to like freshness when it cites
Yeah.
websites in the way that Google will happily show a 20-year-old website. ChatGPT and Claude seem to be quite swayed by freshness.
Yeah, no, statistics and research backs that up. So there's been
Mm,
lots of
cool.
people who've been running research on this stuff, and yeah, it does seem to be something that's a fact. And also ChatGPT can pick things up really quickly. So
Yeah,
ChatGPT has lots of content partnerships with different newspapers,
yeah,
and also they are Bing feeds into ChatGPT as well. So anecdotally, I've seen websites that use Index Now, which is a tool that instantly indexes new content from websites that are enabled with Index Now, like all Wix
nice.
websites have the ability to be connected to Index Now with that are premium websites. For instance, I've seen where I've updated content and I've seen it reflected in ChatGPT in within 30 minutes. I've
Wow.
seen where
Jeez.
I've seen updates to other pages, and I've seen it reflected almost instantaneously in ChatGPT. So
Wow.
it can be really quickly. And it's something that's worth thinking about. But it's all the other thing is that like loads of people are updating their content a lot really quickly. The window between being able to
Mm,
rank and your competitor making an update is
yeah.
getting closer and closer. So I think when I first started this, you would expect to make an update to content, and then you probably have a couple of weeks, couple of months maybe
Yeah.
of ranking before your competitor caught up. But it can be down to like a few
Hours.
hours, few minutes these days.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And the other thing you said was because there's been this whole thing around, I get asked all the time in my workshops if I write articles of ChatGPT, do they rank? And often, I'll quote that how Google changed the wording in their helpful content guidelines from we reward content written by humans for humans, and now it just says we reward content written for humans. And it appears that Google maybe doesn't care whether it was written by AI, but what it cares about it is it's not just the same regurgitated thing that, like you said, has been already written about in the same way 90 times. And so it's about information gain. It's about bringing new, original information, whether that's internal data, internal opinion, expertise, more original research towards the edges of the internet, books, academic papers, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that does seem to help. So that sounds like you think that's also important for appearing in LLM results.
Yeah, so I think that when people say like, "Oh, content written by AI," I think that people think that like you literally just go to ChatGPT and just say, "Write me an article," and it goes,
Yeah,
"Brrr," and then you just post it. And I think there's lots of different grays in between.
yeah,
So I've worked in content long enough to know that subject matter experts are busy and they don't want to talk to the content people. Okay.
oh yeah,
Um, and
massive problem, very common problem. I hear that.
it's incredibly annoying. And like you have to respect it because they're off doing the things that they're subject matter
Mm,
experts on. You have to respect it. And you're like, I need a blog. And they're like, I don't care. So what AI allows you to do is that you can have a 20-minute phone call with this person that's really smart, and you can have a 20-minute phone call. You can use AI to transcribe the phone call. You can
mm,
use another AI to help you knock that phone call into an article. You can, carry out some research, and then you can give it back to them. And then they only need another 20 minutes to make sure that, you're not talking complete craziness. And then you have an article from that subject matter expert that you would not have otherwise. Okay. And that AI allows you to do that. And that is super, super valuable to everyone, right? So I think that,
mm,
use all the tools. And the other thing is that like use them well. Okay. So somebody asked me, what's a good tool for writing AI blogs? And it's like, well, there's a million tools for writing AI blogs. What's really important is that you learn how to train whatever tool you're writing with to write them in a valuable way. So give them good grounding knowledge. So every time you brief an AI on, the content, give them the webinar that talked about it, give them the podcast from your team that talked about it, give them the call that you had with that expert, give them the support documentation that you have on it. If it's internal, use that internal briefing. Give all of that to it to help it write the article. Don't just send it out to the internet to come up with stuff it's going to make up. Give it good grounded knowledge.
Of course.
A tool like Notebook LM is incredibly useful for this. It's free, it's from Google, and essentially you can add in lots and lots of resources, and then you can use it as a knowledge base, and it will only reference what's in the knowledge base that you give it. And it can be super, super useful. For marketers, you can use it, you can use it with your clients. So you get a new client, and let's say they do circus tents, and you know nothing about circus tents. You can take all of the information that they have, their PDFs, podcasts, websites, YouTube videos, everything. You can stick it all into a knowledge base, and then you can ask it questions. I've done it myself with things internally. There was a couple of projects where I'm the person who knows the most about the project, and people kept asking me stuff, and I was like, I don't have time. So I did a bunch of videos, and I talked to myself for a few hours, and I stuck it in this Notebook LM. And now when people ask me, I will literally take their question, paste it into Notebook LM, and it will reply as if it was me. And I go, yes, that is exactly what I would say, and I give that to the person, and it's super useful.
Well, that grounding is, that is a big part of it, isn't it? Because the flip side of all of this is getting AI to write stuff for you. You may lose your grip on reality potentially. It might start creating stuff that's not particularly true. But then also, is there not a problem of the LLMs being manipulable? Are the LLMs manipulable? Could I say that I'm the most award-winning marketing and AI educator on the planet? And if I say it enough times around the internet, will ChatGPT just start to parrot that back at people?
I've seen that happen. But to be fair, I've seen that happen with Google. Like I've seen people manipulate Google results. And, I remember back in the day, there was this woman in Los Angeles, and she put up a bunch of billboards all over Los Angeles. This is like in the 90s or something, saying how great she was and just trying to make herself like a famous person or something. And, so I think that this isn't necessarily an exclusive to AI issue, but it's, it's just a thing that happens. I think you would say.
No, It's really interesting. And so that third pillar of SEO, reputational SEO, which we've for years, for 25 years, we've been trying to get more backlinks. There's agencies who will just get you backlinks, What do you think about that? What does that job look like now? Is it important? What should we do?
So I think when I first started doing SEO, the name of the game was to get lots of backlinks. Didn't really matter where it was, just lots and lots of backlinks. I remember our agency, we got a backlink on the website for the plant watering company that we were working with, and we were like, well done us. We were a marketing agency. We've got a link on a plant watering website. And the name of the game now is relevance, okay? Because if you get lots of links on a bunch of websites that are nothing to do with your niche, right? So let's say you are a plant watering business, but then you get a bunch of links on a shoe website. That's not going to make sense. That's going to dilute the information that the LLM has for you, because they understand that website to be the other website to be about shoes. They understand your website to be about something else, and they haven't connected those two, right? So essentially what you need to think about is building up relevance, okay? So Google has the knowledge graph, and Google has, and they're trained on entities, and Google and all of the LLMs, for instance, are trained on Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is basically just entity after entity after entity. And essentially, if you look at that, what they do is they'll say, like, this is Beyonce, this is her husband, these are her children, this is da 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 da. Those are all the relationships that they have, all the correlations that they have about her. There's a similar profile for you around your business, and it's really important that you use your backlinks to verify that, to help build confidence in the LLM about who you are and what you're for. So, for instance, if you were a business, it's worth making sure that you're listed not just on a general directory, right? So not just on
Yeah.
like any directory, but on, like, let's say if you were a vegan restaurant, you'd want to be listed on Happy Cow because that's a website that's
Yeah.
niche and it's all about
Yeah.
vegan food. So I think with all of the backlinks, it's not just about quantity anymore, and it's not just about DA even,
Mm.
domain authority, but it's specifically about which ones build up the relevance and help to build that brand story about you, that you are this, you serve this audience, you provide this service, and that's that sort of thing.
So is PR still a good way to get backlinks because they have such high domain authority, but we want to just skew more towards relevant PR rather than any PR?
Yeah, and I think also with PR, so with PR, what you also get is you very often get a lot of content syndication. So, for instance,
Yeah.
I've had coverage or gotten coverage for clients in my local newspaper, but the local newspaper is a syndicate of the Daily Mail, for instance. And that, and they've got a huge syndication. They've got their own Daily Mail, and then they've got lots and lots of local newspapers, for instance. And so just because we were in that one local one, we were also spread out to lots of them. So when you
Nice.
think about your PR, it's really important to think about the phrasing that's in your PR, because it will be parroted across the web again and again and again and again, literally verbatim, particularly for syndicated content.
Yeah.
Would make sure that that the phrasing benefits you. The phrasing will benefit the kinds of ways you want to be spoken about in LLMs. Okay,
And is that about
because
consistency? Is that about always, really kind of hammering home the thing that you are, the thing that you do, the thing you're good at, and having that phrase always around the name of your business?
it is about that, but it's also about the way the LLMs work. When you watch an LLM and it literally and it's putting out word, 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 word,
Mm. Yeah.
that is the LLM predicting the next word every single time. So every single time it's predicting the next word. If it sees Mary had a little, it knows that
Yep.
the next word is lamb,
Yeah.
right? If it says like Wix is a website, it knows the next word is builder. Wix is a website builder. It knows that because we've said that all over the web for
Yeah.
like years and years and years. So if it's the case that they're constantly seeing, Crystal Carter is a this, Crystal Carter is a that, Crystal, they don't know what to say about you the next time. And a really easy way to check this is to ask a couple of questions about your business, like who is your brand? And essentially, if you ask it to ChatGPT, ask it to Perplexity, ask it to Claude, or whatever, you can see how different they are. If they're roughly the same for all of these tools, then you're probably doing all right. If
Mm.
they're inconsistent, then they probably aren't. An example I did the other day was it was a company that had an acronym, but their acronym was the same as an institute somewhere else.
Mm.
So Gemini was convinced that they were this institute.
Yeah.
Perplexity and ChatGPT understood, but Gemini was convinced that they were this institute. And so they need to make sure that they always say certain things to make sure that they're clarifying who they are and that they're not this other thing. So you just need to make sure that there's certain things that make sure that they're like, no, I'm this person, I'm not that person.
Yeah, no, that's good. And again, across website, PR, and social, and everywhere else, so it's got that consistency. Right, okay, that's great. God, we've got quite the to-do list there, Crystal. I really appreciate it. Before you go, I would love you to just give us a handful of your top tips that people can action straight away after listening to this to improve their visibility in AI.
So the first thing I would do is check how much you're getting from AI right now. So go into your GA4, check out that Looker Studio, Data Studio that Will was talking about. So have a look and see what traffic you're getting from there. The second thing that I would do is I would make steps to make your website more actionable. So adding in a search bar, adding in more conversion points, adding in more forms, making sure that there's at least one place to convert or take action across every page on your website. And finally, I would take steps to see how LLMs are referring to you now. So ask a few questions, the same set of questions across a few different LLMs, and see if you're getting a consistent response about who you are, what your brand does, what you're known for, what your offering is. And then you'll be able to identify whether or not you need to take steps to improve your visibility and to disambiguate and to be more visible on AI.
Amazing. Well, look, Crystal, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Hope I get to chat to you again soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much.